I'm curious. I am curious. Curious
by nature.
Thank you for listening to Curious by Nature. I'm Jessica Johnson, the CEO at Newswise. Today, we're looking at how recent advancements in artificial intelligence are affecting education. Leaders in education will find that there are many ways to improve it. However, it may take some time before it begins to better teachers' lives. My guest today has been working in education and researching education to study what works well. She's investigating important ways to improve student success and also looking at how AI is affecting teachers. Samantha Keppler, thank you so much for joining me today. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Samantha Keppler, and I'm an assistant professor of technology and operations at the Stephen Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. My most recent research, still ongoing, is looking at the role of generative AI in the OpenAI ChatGPT release initially, and then over time, how that's changed to involve a lot of different AI tools that teachers may or may not be using, or their students may or may not be using. And so looking at the role of this massive private sector-led change and how it's influencing the public schools. Over the last school year, the 2023-2024 school year, we followed a group of teachers from the beginning of the school year till the end, as they're trying to figure out, okay, whether they even should use generative AI tools. If they're going to use them, what are they going to use them for? And we were approaching this not from a sense of how are they using AI in the classroom. So a lot of people might be thinking you're using AI in the classroom like a student might be using AI and the teacher is facilitating that, like a chat bot. We approached it from the teacher work perspective. So how are teachers using this for their own work outside of the classroom? So like, how are they planning their teaching using generative AI? Or are they? What are they using it for? And so from that angle, we're following teachers at the beginning of the school year. So about a year ago, all these teachers that we were following are really similar. They all were pretty much novice users of generative AI. They had heard a lot about it. They hadn't really used it themselves. ChatGPT was really the primary thing that was out there for them to use and hear about. There were some other things emerging, but not at like a large scale that ChatGPT was. So they were really similar at the beginning. And so what we did is we conducted one-on-one sessions with these teachers, and we gave them some standard prompts to enter into ChatGPT. We had them practice with ChatGPT, and we observed them, and we saw what they were using it for sort of intuitively, or what was like their first initial draw in terms of how they thought about this tool being helpful to them. Then, so even though they were really, really similar at the beginning, novice users not using it very much, we saw them evolve into very different users over the course of the school year. And one of the groups of teachers was reported that by the end of the year, the generative AI tools that they were using, which were still primarily ChatGPT, in our study anyway, were helping them feel more productive and teach higher quality work. Now, it's not all the teachers, about a third of the teachers were in that bucket. And so what we learned from this study was a little bit about why some teachers are feeling more productive with generative AI, why some teachers are not feeling more productive, and also why some teachers are not using it at all. We had like these three groups in our study, and we really could, through our observations, our interviews, and our surveys, following these teachers, we could learn a lot about what they were experiencing during this big seismic shift.
Do you have anything that you can share about those teachers who found it very helpful and it was helping them be more effective? In what ways and how they used it?
Yeah, so the surprising finding there was a lot of the conversation about how generative AI will help teachers is that it will help them create materials. So it'll help them make worksheets. It'll help them make activities, lesson plans, etc. And even Sal Khan was one of the leading ed tech executives and founders, said that on New Year's Day 2024, he had a post on LinkedIn that said, looking ahead to 2024, I see generative AI tools cutting 90% of teachers' admin tasks, which is unclear to me exactly what admin tasks mean, but it's this idea that I guess there's some tedium in what teachers are doing. The teachers that were feeling more productive with generative AI were doing this a little bit, but what they were really using the tool for was something different. They were using it for advice. So what teachers do is they get stuck. They're teaching, for example, how to add positive and negative numbers, and their students are not getting it. The thing that they did last year is not working, or there's a subset of students that are just still struggling. And so teachers are coming to generative AI. These teachers that are feeling better with generative AI are coming to the tool and going, how do I explain this differently? What manipulatives can I use? Because these teachers are trying to get it right, not just get it done. And so this use of asking for advice and making sure teachers feel good and confident about trying something new or different that might work better, that's where the teachers are really feeling that this tool is helping them with their work.
And what about for grading? Because I think grading takes a long time for teachers.
So we did ask teachers about the grading implications of generative AI. And that is one area where there's really, right now, complex effect. Because on one hand, there is an opportunity and there's new companies that are emerging specifically for grading to help teachers manage this big part of their workload. On the other hand, right now, at least in our study, grading is primarily where generative AI is actually causing teachers to do more work, not less, because the student use is becoming, especially at the high school level, is becoming hard for teachers by themselves to control. They do not yet have a lot of principal or district support over how to manage student use. And so, for example, some of the English teachers that I spoke with are spending more time grading, more time interacting with students, addressing student use when they were not supposed to use it. And so right now it's big frustration actually with grading. The future is sort of still, we're unclear what will happen in the future and if these new tools will help and how districts will get the student use under control. And I mean student use when it should not be happening. Obviously can be a positive student use case as well, but this is causing a really big issue with grading. And so right now it's sort of a mixed bag as well. We had our teachers that we followed were all grade levels and all subject areas, trying to get a large variety. And the elementary school teachers were some of the teachers that felt most positive about generative AI because they were not necessarily frustrated at the same time by the student use. So for example, a third grade or first grade teacher, they can primarily use it to help them with their work, but without the frustration that the students are at the same time, like there's not this grappling that they have to deal with. And so at that grade level, there's a lot of opportunity for teachers to feel more confident with what they're doing or to help them get unstuck when they're feeling stuck. So this is where, teacher work evolves backwards from some learning objectives that are defined federally by the state, one of the Common Core State Standards, the Next Generation Science Standards. These are the things that teachers have to help their students learn. And working backwards from that, they're trying to figure out the best things, the most effective, most efficient way to reach those learning objectives. And that's where teachers can get frustrated when they're trying to help their students learn these topics or master these concepts, and they have been unsuccessful or they're getting frustrated. So I think that that's where there's the largest opportunity for teachers to ask advice, almost like they would ask a colleague. And one example from our research is that sometimes it's embarrassing to admit to a colleague that your students are struggling with a concept, right? It might reflect poorly on you. You might feel nervous that if you reveal that your students are still struggling with this concept, it's sort of embarrassing that it hasn't worked for you when maybe it's worked for the other third grade teacher. And so this is a anonymous, safe place for teachers to ask for some advice to a non-judgmental, generally willing to help AI, and it can help teachers really get over that.
Well, there's been a lot of coverage recently about phone use and technology use, and how difficult it is for some schools with phones and AI. But then I also read a recent article about how a university professor had given his students a task of developing, startups, and how that they did it in such a much faster way by using AI. I don't know about those two things and kind of these various across the spectrum, good and bad, and challenges. What you think about that?
The way I would reconcile these opposing or like these complex realities is that there's really two ways to use generative AI. If you think about it this way, I think it helps make sense of things. You can use it for outputs. So that means that you're going to generative AI and you're asking it to produce an output. The other way that you can use generative AI is ask for input. You can ask for its advice, its input. Now, in the examples you just gave in the class where they're developing AI startups, they're not asking generative AI for the output, the fully developed, perfect startup idea. They're asking it for input about how to make their idea better. At the same time, those examples from the schools where they're trying to ban technology, or there's serious concerns about AI use in K-12 schools, it's because they're worried that students are using it for outputs. And that skips the thinking and the learning if you're just using it for outputs. Now, I don't think that most teachers would, like when I've talked to the teachers in this study, for example, I asked one of these teachers, I go, well, how do you navigate the good versus the bad here? Because it can help students learn by providing inputs and advice. However, there is the risk of outputs. And I think we have not, and the big tech has not yet developed the tools that really make sure that for young children or high school students primarily, I guess, that would be using AI in the classroom to really make sure that they're using it for input in their essays. For example, like, how do I structure this essay? How do I develop a thesis statement? What are the possible topics that I could talk about in my essay? How do I make sure that it's convincing? Can you help me refine this sentence? As opposed to make this essay for me, right? We're working on that, we're getting there, but I think that's the way that we can think about it. Is inputs is generally great for like learning and thinking and development. Outputs is where it can get problematic, especially when the objective is to make sure that the user is thinking and learning at that time.
And tell me about your recent publication with teacher and classroom supplies.
So this study evolved through a partnership with the largest teacher crowdfunding platform, Donors Choose. And so this platform is a way, for those of you that don't know about it, any public school teacher in the U.S. can go on this platform and describe a project that they want to do in their classroom and ask donors for support, financial support, to fund this project. And the project involves resources. So it could be pencils and paper. It could be a couch for the classroom and tables. It can be musical instruments. There's a large variety of resources that are requested on the platform. But the teachers can request exactly what it is they need, and anyone can donate $1, $10, $100. And so the research we've done on this is trying to look at how this affects outcomes that we care about in public education, such as student performance on standardized exams and teacher retention in the public school system. And so we have 2 papers related to this topic, and one of them shows that there's a positive effect of teacher funding on student performance on standardized exams. And it's really quite significant, where an additional $400 of materials in the classroom, we have causally identified it as increasing the number of students performing at a basic level of proficiency on the standardized tests in the state. It's about 2 to 9 additional students with just $400, which is a pretty cheap investment compared to some of the other financial investments in education. And then the teacher retention effect also we found. So for example, if a teacher's project is funded on this platform, they're more likely to stay at their school, and they're actually more likely to stay in the state public education system as well. And so these studies together sort of show that these basic supplies matter in education. And I don't know why this is such a big surprise to people, but our education system does not provide basic supplies. Very little is provided to teachers. Teachers are spending $600 to $700 out of pocket every year. In addition to that, they are like going to every donation center on the planet. There might be some stories there about how much money and how much effort is put into trying to provide, especially at the elementary level, create a classroom environment that is welcoming to children.
Can you please repeat what the names of these organizations are?
So Donors Choose is the teacher crowdfunding platform. However, I've noticed there's a lot of other, I think even Staples now has like a classroom supply list. There's Amazon wish list. There's a couple different platforms that you can go on to donate to to teachers. There might even be opportunities within your own school or district to do something like this. Yeah, those are Donors Choose is like the biggest one. The biggest one in terms of it's over $1.6 billion have gone to the public schools far from Donors Choose. And they have that equity focus, which I think helps, from a donor's perspective, helps you feel like your money is going to the schools that are the most need. It's going to have the biggest effect.
What would you want the presidential candidates to say or to do about education?
What I would like to hear them say is that every public school teacher in this country from now on will have the basic supplies they need provided to them or paid for by their public schools or districts. We are the richest country in the world, and our research has shown that the supplies matter. And I think in the AI era, this is going to become even more important because the physical supplies are going to be, as they always have been, instrumental to learning experiences and hands-on enrichment. At the same time, schools are going to have to spend money on AI. It's not free. It costs money. And so we need to make an investment in the physical supplies and also make sure that the AI tools are there too.
What is the best way for individuals to support schools in their area or outside of their area?
What we find is, at least for the test score effect, meaning the effect of these basic supplies on student learning, it's almost entirely driven by schools with a high proportion of students that are eligible for a free or reduced price lunch. So these are students that are like at or above, slightly above the federal poverty level, at least at the time of the study, the way that the schools were identified. So, and in fact, if parents at schools with very few students that are in poverty donate, it's a contributing to the inequity problem. The private funds from families that go to public schools that are wealthy is an issue. So it's very hard for individuals to help this problem. And that's why I think we need a policy solution.
If you had one ask of something that you could get with a magic wand, what would that be?
I think the one thing that I would like to see around everything related to the classroom supplies or the AI is that I think what I want is more teacher voices being elevated. I get really frustrated when big tech comes out, talks a lot about teacher work. I don't think most people understand what teachers' work is actually like and what it involves. It's not just about making activities and worksheets, for example, about a lot more than that. And I think one of the goals of our research over the past year talking to teachers was to really try to inject the teacher voice a little bit into the broader conversation that seems to be dominated by tech, as opposed to education leaders, former teachers, current teachers. There's just not enough teacher voice. And I think there needs to be a productive conversation. It can't be just a one-sided, we're going to save education from the outside, or we know this will help you, even though we don't understand exactly what you do. These things are problematic. And I think we need a productive conversation. Even conflict would be great, but not a one-sided narrative.
What do you find most fascinating in what you're doing right now?
There is some good that can come of this. So, for example, even in my own class, I'm starting to teach next week at the university level to the MBA students at Michigan Ross. And we're using an AI tool to support students during their quizzes and homework assignments. So this tool we've trained and programmed to do what I've talked about before, which is provide inputs and not outputs, give them advice about how to answer the questions and stuff. And I'm really excited to learn what the students think.
Thank you, Samantha. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your experience and all the time that you spent looking at this issue and sharing it.
Curious by Nature is a production of Newswise. More than 7,000 journalists get the Newswise wires. Visit newswise.com and find out how to spread your news today.